projected results in state elections here in Germany indicate that the Alternative for Germany, the AfD, has won its first state election in Thuringia. Now it's on course to be the second biggest party in the state of Saxony, behind the conservative Christian Democrats. The AfD is an anti-immigrant party that opposes the German government's funding of military aid to Ukraine. Now, if these projected results prove correct, they will deal a blow to parties in Germany's federal coalition government. And to talk more about the wider implications of these elections, I'm again joined in the studio here by Richard Walker, our Chief International Editor. Richard, just explain to us and our audience, what does this mean for Germany's overall political landscape, these projections now?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is the AfD, the far-right party that's been growing steadily in Germany for the last decade or so, is now pretty much confirmed as the strongest political force in Eastern Germany, the former, the part of Germany that used to be ruled by the communists. We got a first glimpse of this in the European elections this summer, when the AfD came in a clear first place in every Eastern German state, and aside from Berlin. And what we're seeing now in these two states is in Thuringia, so in one of the states that has voted today, the AfD coming clear top with a 7 percentage point margin of victory, roughly, over 6 or 7% over the mainstream conservatives. And that is for a party that is led by a man who is extremely controversial, a man who has been convicted in courts of using Nazi slogans in his speeches. This is the man who is now leading the party that came top in that state. In the neighbouring state of Saxony that we're also looking at here, the AfD coming second, but really hot on the heels of the mainstream conservatives, also gaining votes compared to the last time around. So a strong showing for the AfD, for this far-right party. On top of that, we have a far-left party that is surging, that has gone from 0 to a significant polling in both of those states. And what both of those parties have in common is a very kind of pro-Russia foreign policy, saying that it's time for Germany to stop supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia's invasion. And I think that's a sign of the sort of political stress in the system in German society with the current course that Germany is following. And I think what's going to be interesting is to see what kind of an effect that may or may not have on the bigger mainstream parties. For instance, the mainstream conservatives in Saxony also ran on a platform saying that it's time for Germany to rethink its position towards the Ukraine war.
Richard, we've just got some projected results in Thuringia, so I'm just going to interrupt you there, and we can take a look at those. As I say, the projected results are in for the state of Thuringia. Let's take a look at the numbers. The Left Party, that had been leading a fragile minority government, has suffered pretty significant losses. It has 12.4% of the vote. The far right, Alternative for Germany, is the largest party with 30.8%. The conservative Christian Democrats, the CDU, have 24.5%. The centre-left Social Democrats of Chancellor Olaf Scholz have 7%. The Greens are on 4%, and the Free Democrats have 1.2%. The Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW, a new left-wing populist party, has had a quite significantly good debut with 15.8% of the vote. Let's see what these numbers will have an impact on the seats for each party in Thuringia State Parliament. It's going to look like this, with the far-right Alternative for Germany projected to take 30 seats. The conservative Christian Democrats look set to have 24. The left-wing populist BSW, as I say, that's the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, that's predicted to take 15 seats. The former governing party, the Left, is projected to have 12, and the centre-left SPD, Chancellor Olaf Scholz's party, is set to have 7 seats. We can go back to our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase, in Erfurt, in Thuringia. Nina, a projected win for the far right, as we have been reporting. I just would be interested to get your initial thoughts on those figures that we've just heard.
Well, Jared, of course, there's still, it's not clear yet. We don't have the final results. They are trickling in at the moment, those numbers from the polling stations, and we are already seeing a difference when you look at the numbers that public broadcaster ARD are giving us to the numbers that public broadcaster ZDF are giving us. So it's still not the final results. Having said that, of course, it does still look as though the AfD, this far-right party, and especially its right-wing extremist chapter here in Thuringia, is essentially celebrating a victory here today. Now, whether that means that they're going to go into government here in Erfurt, that is far from clear. It's highly unlikely at this point, because so far all the more traditional democratic parties have said that they are standing by this firewall that they say is necessary to keep them at bay, this anti-immigration, anti-establishment, anti-system, if you will, party that Bjorn Höcke, the lead candidate, has established here in this state. But if you look at those seats, that is sending another very, very crucial message for everybody to look out for, because Germany has a complicated political system, but it does come down to just how many seats does a party get in a parliament. If you get 1/3 of the seats in a regional parliament, that means that whether or not you're in government, you have a so-called blocking minority. So anything a potential government under the Conservatives, for example, with some other coalition partners, like the new BSW movement, together potentially with the SPD, and also the Left Party could form, anything they would suggest could be blocked by a party that has 1/3 of the seats in the regional parliament. Now, that might sound too complicated, but it means that essentially the AfD can wield influence from tomorrow onwards if they want to, or from when the final results have come in.
The potential for significant influence, as you've been describing, Nina. You've also been describing how this firewall of the established parties to keep the AfD at bay. If the AfD isn't able to govern, will they try and argue this as being undemocratic?
That is something that they always do, and you also have to admit that it is fairly common political procedure for any party that comes out on top in those election results to say, okay, now it's up to us to start coalition talks and to start forming a government. That is not something that is unique to the AfD. We've already heard Bjorn Höcke, the lead candidate of the AfD, say exactly that. He says that voters have given him essentially the highest position in this election, so it's up to him to form a government. However, having mentioned already the firewall, it is very unlikely that he'll manage to do that just now. But of course, the voices are growing louder who are saying we need a more pragmatic approach. So there is going to be a lot of pressure within the Conservatives, but also within Olaf Scholz's party, where people are saying it hasn't worked to just warn people of this anti-immigration right-wing extremist group. It also hasn't worked to say, we'll just do better politics than them. We need a different approach, and maybe that means to work together with them in some fields, one field or another, and that truly would be a watershed moment for Germany.
Now, Nina, one of the, I guess, coalition constellations that people are talking about already is an alliance between the CDU, which according to the figures looks to be ahead, and the new Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance. This is a left-wing migration skeptic party that was formed just at the beginning of this year. Could you tell us a little bit more about this party?
Indeed, and Jared, describing this party just shows again just how difficult it is to describe this party. Sahra Wagenknecht was a member of the Left Party, so you could argue that she is a left-wing politician. But then she broke away from the Left Party. She founded her own movement a couple of months ago, and essentially gave it her own name. So this is the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance. Now, we don't know what this party really stands for. From what we can tell, Sahra Wagenknecht has positions that are very far left when it comes to social politics, when it comes to equality of income, for example. But as far as migration is concerned, I wouldn't call the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance a left-wing party. This is definitely something that you could also hear from more centrist, conservative, or even right-wing parties, her positions in that field. So she's the big question mark tonight, and we'll definitely have to try and find out just what she stands for. But that is also a challenge for those who want to enter a coalition government with her.
That's our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase in Erfurt. Nina, thank you very much. And our political correspondent, Matthew Moore, is also in Erfurt. Matthew, good to see you. You're in front of the state parliament where a protest against the far right is happening at the moment. What's it like there and what are people telling you?
Yes, Jared, that's right. This was a protest arranged, as one of the organisers told me, basically to offer a space for people to come together who may be frustrated, who may be angry, who may be disappointed in the results. And also people who may be scared by the results tonight. And really that describes the atmosphere because it's flat, it's really forlorn. There's a sense of real negativity in the air. And you speak to people and they say they kind of lost hope. And then in the next breath they say, but when people come together like this, it shows that we are in the majority, that there are enough of us who are against this far-right party. And so they say that they wanted to show that there's a majority that really is against these far-right politics of the AfD who have come out first tonight. And it's also about seeing that other people think the same way as you, that there's a sense of community. And so although it's been flat and forlorn, there's been moments where people have come together and they've been hugging and listening to speeches, and there's been some chuckling and laughing as they've sang. But yeah, the mood overall really flat, really concerned about what the future holds for the state of Thuringia and Germany.
Now, Matthew, you've been travelling around the region recently. You've done some explainers for our Instagram account at DW News. Just tell us, what were some of the issues that have been really important to people that you were sort of able to gather when you were talking to them? And what kind of messages do you think that they wanted to send at the ballot box today?
Yeah, so in my reporting, there's two sides to this. You meet people who see this as a very critical moment in Thuringia's history and German history, who see it as a moment where angst, as they say in Germany, where people are afraid and they're voting because they're afraid. And then they're trying to kind of promote a side of Thuringia that's open, that's welcoming, because they say, their neighbours are from other countries, they're foreigners, and they're here, and they're worried about how they feel in this state as the far right continues to go up the polls. And then on the other hand, you speak to people who say, for them that's not the issue. The issue is the war in Ukraine. They're really concerned about security, about German money being spent on weapons in Ukraine. They're concerned about Germany potentially being dragged into a wider conflict. And then there's also the issue of immigration, which is at the background whenever you speak to people about German politics, because either people think that this is a big problem because they're worried about too many people who are coming to Germany and that the German system cannot cope, or that the German system cannot cope with integrating people. And so there's a kind of competing mix of issues, and depending on who you speak to, you see that they have different views on how they should be tackled.
Let's go to Saxony now and turn to the expected results from there. Projections are indicating a slight lead for the Conservative Christian Democrats, or CDU. Right now, the CDU is in a governing coalition with the Greens and the centre-left Social Democrats. Now, projections have the CDU on track to win over 31% of the vote. They're followed closely behind by the far-right AfD with about 30%. Now, this newcomer party, the BSW, or the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, is in third place, taking around 12% of the ballots. The SPD, so that's Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats, they're in fourth with around 8.5%, followed by the Greens with just over 5% of the votes. Let's take a closer look at the balance of power in Saxony's parliament after these elections and these projections. Now, the Conservative CDU has won the most seats with 43, according to the projections, followed closely behind by the AfD with 41. The Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, BSW, would be the third largest party, taking 16 seats. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's SPD and the Greens round out the remainder, taking 12 and 8 seats respectively. And our chief political correspondent, Michaela Küfner, is in Dresden. She's at an event for the conservative Christian Democrats. Michaela, just wondering your initial thoughts after hearing those figures.
Well, here in Saxony, particularly the state premier from the Conservatives, Michael Kretschmer, is celebrating that he, and one can say he personally, was able to hold the far-right AfD party at bay here. He, with a bit of luck and more counting, if these results are firmed up, they're very good news for him, because they could potentially allow him to continue the current coalition with the Social Democrats, which is the Chancellor's very own party, and Olaf Scholz's party, and the Greens, who just about made it into the regional parliament here. So he's providing stability where others are getting the jitters in neighbouring Thuringia because of the AfD coming top. So that's the huge success story. At the same time, everybody here has heard the message that the far-right AfD is stronger than they could have expected just a couple of years ago, and that it certainly won't go away. And Michael Kretschmer could also potentially find himself in a position where he might need to seek a completely new coalition with a completely new party, with the Sahra Wagenknecht, which is led by a former left party leading figure who has pretty much a right-wing take on migration here in Germany. So she is a populist as well. All very complicated options, and one could say this is a laboratory really for what potential coalitions there could be if, and that's a big if, the far-right AfD manages to get upwards of 30% nationally here in Germany, but it isn't. It's around about 15-16%. So there's a limit to what this tells us about where Germany nationwide is politically right now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. I mean, Germany is holding federal elections, I think in around a year's time. It's next year at least. The CDU would be looking at these results today and being quite delighted with them, one would expect, a year out from federal elections.
Yes, the Conservative CDU is going to be pretty pleased. I would also expect the opposition leader, the leader of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, to be very pleased with himself as well over these election results. At the same time, the person who made this happen, Michael Kretschmer, is an exceptional figure within the Conservative camp. He holds a very unusual position of not continuing with the level of support for Ukraine we're seeing right now. I spoke to people behind the scenes. Within the Conservative CDU, they see zero chance of that actually feeding into what the Conservatives see as the national policy proposals, but it also shows that a bit of flexibility, this whole campaign that was also run on do you want war or peace, here in the East, which is very much unwilling to look at Russia completely as aggressor only, that this makes a difference. So it's a very different tone of conservatism that managed to succeed here in the East.
Now, Michaela, let's talk about another important party in all of this. This is the newcomer, the populist BSW, the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, a left-wing migration skeptic party that's managed to do very well in just a few short months since it was founded at the beginning of this year. What are your initial thoughts about this alliance and how well it's done?
Well, in short, it shows that it's almost like a mathematical populism formula, that taking elements of left-wing policy on social spending, for instance, and elements of right-wing policy, which is anti-migration, can work. This party launched a spectacular rise, immediately hitting double digits just after a couple of months, but also because of the very personal popularity of Sahra Wagenknecht. So at the very least, it proves that Germany too is becoming more and more about personality politics, and that populism, if you merge it from both sides of the political spectrum, can be a formula for success. Bündnis Sahra Wagenknecht could still shake up the political landscape. You hear from the former Big Ten parties like Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats that they feel that they are splintering the political landscape here in Germany, but they clearly are providing a voice for many people who felt unheard. She has single-handedly pretty much destroyed the Left Party in the East, the Left Party, which is the successor of the communists here in former East Germany. And she clearly has an appetite for more. So she's an upcoming force, certainly in the East. I very much doubt she's able to replicate any of that in the old West of Germany.
That's DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, there in Dresden for us. Thanks a lot, Michaela.